Hello, everyone. Welcome to our talk. In today's presentation, we're going to showcase a vulnerability research we conducted at Clarity Team 82. In this vulnerability research, we managed to find vulnerabilities in Ruijie's cloud infrastructure that allowed us to exploit them and attack devices from a remote location. My name is Tomer, and this is Noam, my colleague. We are both part of the Clarity Team 82 research group. At Clarity's Team 82 research group, we conduct vulnerability research on critical infrastructure, which consists of devices, all sorts of types. For example, devices used in operational technology, devices that are used in medical settings, and also IoT devices, such as the device we're going to showcase today. So I wanted to start off this presentation with something that I want to share with you all. I've got this peculiar hobby of scrolling through the Wi-Fi lists on my phone and seeing what kinds of names are popping up. Often, I find myself asking the question, could I hack them if I didn't have the password to those networks? And would I be able to infiltrate these networks? Well, obviously, the answer is yes. This is what I do on a daily basis when I'm going to my workplace. I'm finding vulnerabilities and exploit vulnerabilities on devices, and I manage to hack them and exploit their vulnerabilities. But essentially, we're asking the question today, how? So in our case with Ruijie, the quite obvious answer was the cloud. And in our case, this was exactly what we did. We managed to exploit vulnerabilities in the cloud infrastructure of Ruijie, and we were able to exploit vulnerabilities on the devices that are remote to us. And so we were able to do this exploit chain in order to attack a device from a remote location, from a remote network. But not only that, we did manage to do it with the cloud infrastructure against all of their devices because of that bridge that is called the cloud platform. And that's what actually we're going to show you today. So let's talk about our target. In this slide, you can see an access point provided by Ruijie, the manufacturer of network appliances. Ruijie Networks is a company providing solutions for network and offices and a lot more settings that are provided here in the slide. Their devices are mainly used for networking and for management of networks in different settings. You may see their device when you're walking through a stadium, maybe in this venue here, maybe in a terminal, and you may even notice them when you're trying to connect to the network on your Wi-Fi device. And when you're walking there, you won't even notice that this device is actually providing a large area with network accessibility. Well, that is actually enabled because of the mesh configuration technology that allows several devices to also share the common network. So these devices actually provide the feature of cloud connectivity and also provide the Wi-Fi accessibility. And when we are talking about our target for research today, which is in this specific scenario the access point, we are actually talking about an embedded research. And usually when we are talking about an embedded research, we are starting our investigation or an analysis with trying to find the attack surface that is exposed to us, the attackers or the researchers. And so most of the times we will look for the exposed services that are actually accessible for us, the attacker. In our case, it could be a web interface that is exposed, a FTP server, or maybe even an SNMP interface that can be utilized and can be researched in order to find vulnerabilities that we can exploit in order to actually exploit the device and be able to overtake it. Well, this is all fine, but we want more. Because you see, in our scenario, we are actually attacking a device from a local network. In the scenario I just provided you, the attacker is sitting on the same network as the device and is exposed and accessible to the services I just talked about. But we want more, as I stated. And so we want the ability to be an attacker on a different network and be able to actually exploit a device that is sitting on a remote location, on a remote network, without even being in physical proximity or with being in a network that is not the same network. And you see, in this scenario, as the attacker, we are not actually accessible to the services that are provided by that device. We're sitting on a different network, on the one, whereas the device, our target, the Ruijie access point, is sitting on a LAN network and is actually segregated from the wide area network or the internet using a router that provides NAT functionality or a firewall. And so we are actually blocked in our accessibility to those services most of the times. But there is a solution, so don't worry. We have the cloud that is actually an interface that allows us to communicate with devices from a remote location. This is perfect for us. So let's talk about the Ruijie cloud platform. Well, as a lot of vendors do, the Ruijie cloud platform is provided by Ruijie to their customers that use their devices in their networks. You see, for example, if I were to be a sysadmin or a network manager, and I were to go to a, let's say, a vacation, I would like the ability to solve problems that might occur when I'm not around. And so this platform allows me to configure devices from a remote location, to monitor the network, and to actually provide solutions from a remote location. And yeah, when I go to the web interface and watch what can I do with the device I own, I can see that I can use the log history to watch the logs. I can use the configuration to configure the device from a remote location. And all of this thanks to the cloud platform. This is amazing, and it's nice to have. And it's also amazing for us, the researchers, because it's a platform that allows to interact with the device from a remote location. So let's discuss a little bit about the initialization of a device inside our network with regards to the cloud connectivity. The first stage when a device is connected to a network will be the device provisioning stage. The device will state hello and will connect back to the cloud service. And when it's connected to our network, it will try to connect back. Once it connects to the server of the cloud, it will provide a serial number, which is an identifying value that is unique to the device once it goes out from the manufacturing facility. So the Ruijie cloud platform will check and verify the serial number that is provided by the device. It will make sure that it's a real device and that it's actually a valid serial number. And so once the serial number is digested, the cloud service will approve it and the device will be provisioned. Well, that's only the first stage, because then we, as the owner of the device, we really want to be the only one that are able to interact with our device. So as the device owner, the first thing I will do when I connect the device to the network is to go to the web interface using my account. And the first thing I will do will go to the Add Device feature. There I will be prompted with a serial number form that I can provide a serial number of a device I want to claim as my own. I will go to the device, I will flip it around, I will show you right now the label of our device. As you see, it's not the whole serial number because I don't want you to use my device. But I can use this serial number and put it inside our serial number form, and voila, we've got the device provisioned and claimed, and we can also utilize it from a remote location. That is actually the wonderful feature that we are able to use with that cloud platform. One intriguing thing with that, well, what is actually the communication between the device and the Ruijie cloud interface? In our case, it's quite simple. The device sends notifications about its status, and the cloud infrastructure allows me, as the owner of the device, to configure it over the air, to send upgrades to the firmware, and to monitor its state. So, great. We've got the basic premise of the device and cloud interactions. We know what the device does when it's initially connected to our network, but we need to dig deeper, and that's why we're here. So, digging deeper, in our case, would be to go to the vendor site and to download the firmware of the device from their site. This was quite easy, and we actually found it very quickly, which was nice. Thank you for Ruijie. And we were quite stumbled when we tried to analyze that firmware image and to extract the file system from it. Well, as you see, the entropy is quite high of the firmware image file, and it's quite flat. Just to make sure that everyone are on the same page, entropy means that there is disorder in the information that is provided by that file. So in our case, the file is not actually it's not that easy to extract the file system from that file. And that is because it doesn't have constructs that allow us to infer what kind of information are in there. So it could be either that the file is packed or either it is encrypted. And in our case, it was encrypted. This is actually because our analysis, we concluded to this conclusion because we couldn't find any constructs that allow us to tear down the wrapper of the packing and actually gain access to the file system. So yeah, it was actually encrypted. So how do we continue from here? Well, we've got three options. Well, you see, most vendors actually don't ship their device or market their device initially with an encrypted firmware. This is actually a feature that is quite relevant and quite new. So we could infer that some devices had the firmware unencrypted at some point of time. So this means that we can actually go to that specific firmware version, maybe use the Wayback Machine, maybe go to the vendor site and see if there are any older firmware versions, and we can actually use this to go to the firmware version that was the actual version that integrated the encryption scheme into the firmware of the device. So this means that once we gain access to that firmware, which is actually the switch firmware, I call it, we can actually roll back the encryption scheme and have access to the firmware that are encrypted. Well, this is only the first option. The second option will be to use hardware hacking to solder off the flash chip that contains the firmware that is unencrypted, decrypted, and to extract the firmware file system from it. This is also a viable option. The third option, which is the option we decided, is to actually find a vulnerability from a local network, not a very intricate vulnerability, that allows us to run code or to run command shells on the device and to play around with the device we own. So, as I stated, we actually chose this. And 3 hours later, more or less, we managed to find a vulnerability that allowed us to actually interact with the device. Not a very intricate vulnerability, as I stated, but it allowed us to run commands on the device from a local interface. And this was amazing, because now we can interact with the device, and we can actually start our research, let's say, hands-on. So we did want to actually be able to decrypt the firmwares anyway. So we managed to find the RG upgrade crypto component that allowed us, evidently, to continue our research. So let's talk about this component. An analysis of the component called RG upgrade crypto, which I don't think I already stated, is an actual ELF binary. We found this peculiar string, upgrade crypt v1, which was very interesting and also very familiar. In fact, it was very familiar because we already saw it. We saw it inside the encrypted firmware image. This was the actual smoking gun. We found our target. We found that component that actually decrypts the firmware image. So further analysis of that component, we managed to find the encryption scheme. It wasn't that difficult, and the encryption scheme is actually symmetric, a rolling SOR plus shift. So at this point, we had two options. We could either try to roll back the encryption scheme, reverse engineer it, write our own Python script in order to extract the firmwares, or secondly, and what we decided, to emulate the binary. And that's actually quite simple. We created an environment that is similar to the environment inside the device, downloaded all the necessary libraries, used QEMU, and we were able to emulate that binary. As you can see, we show a screenshot. You can see a POSIX star archive that is actually the encrypted content. And so we were successful. We managed to gain hold of the content of the firmware. And actually, when we extracted the components inside that tar archive, we were glad to see that we are actually able to access the control file, which is a hardware version used by the device to verify that it is a viable version for the corresponding physical device. The root file system that is actually the file system we want, and the kernel of the device. I will make it clear that actually the most interesting part of this was the actual root file system, the squashfs file system. This is because it's containing all components that are relevant to the logic of the device and are actually the proprietary implementation of the things we want to understand, which is, in our case, the cloud interactions.
Perfect. So now we have access to both a real-life working device and also the file system containing all the different files, everything we need. So what's next? What's our next goal? You see, our goal now is to understand how does a device connect to the cloud, meaning what protocol, what endpoints, everything about including that, and to understand what it actually does behind the scenes, how it authenticates to the cloud, what kind of APIs exist, all of that sorts. And to do that, we need to do the first step that is always the same, and it is to actually identify the cloud binary that handles all cloud communication. Now, sadly, there's no magic bullet into doing it, because we're talking about finding one binary in an entire file system. We have no idea what it's named, what it does, nothing. So let's go through what I usually do when I try to find a cloud binary in a new device that I hacked into. So the first step is to look at startup script. You see, like Tomer told you, this device immediately calls back to the cloud, to the vendor's cloud, immediately when it boots up and wants to do a cloud pairing, meaning this needs to be ran, this cloud script or cloud binary needs to be ran on boot. Now, this actually depends on different Linux distributions. It could be NT, it could be systemd. However, usually we will find vendor-specific code in the startup scripts that allow them to connect back and call back to the cloud whenever they get boot up. Next, I simply look for different strings. If, for example, I know the domain that the vendor's cloud is hosted on, or even just the top-level domain, I can try and look and grep and find binaries that contains this string. And lastly, if all fails, I try and look for different configuration files, because many times vendors do not hard code their endpoints or their strings or secrets into their binaries, and instead they use a configuration file. And by finding the configuration file that is probably used by the cloud binary, I can find who opens it and who interacts with it. And after a short investigation, we found it. In our case, mqlink.elf is the binary that handles all cloud communication. Next, our job is to understand how it actually works and how it calls back to the cloud. Now, once again, there's no one specific way it needs to do that, because there are tons and tons of different protocols, and each vendor simply pick and chooses what they want and how they want to do their cloud communication API. What I usually do is, once again, I try and look for strings or libraries to help me identify what kind of protocol is used for cloud communication. For example, if we know that the vendor is using MQTT for their cloud communication, I would find strings about common libraries used by MQTT clients like Power or Mosquito. In our case, as you can see, we found tons and tons of string showcasing the vendor use Mosquito, which is a very popular library for MQTT clients. and this helped us conclude that they use MQTT for their cloud communication. So what is MQTT, you might be asking? Well, MQTT is a very, very popular protocol for device communication between IoT devices and the cloud platform of the vendor. It is basically a messaging protocol, meaning its sole purpose is to distribute messages to different clients. And it works by all clients connecting to one centralized entity, which is the broker. And then they start sending messages over something that's called channels or named topics in MQTT, which are basically strings that are relevant and showcase which messages should be distributed to which clients. Now, MQTT is a publisher-subscriber protocol, meaning the entire terminology is working on if you want to send a message, you will publish it, and if you want to receive messages from a specific topic, you would subscribe to it. And that way, the broker knows which messages should get to which clients. So we know our cloud binary, in the case of Ruijie, uses MQTT. So let's find out what we need to build our own client and what Ruijie needs to help them connect their devices to their cloud platform. And the first thing is quite obvious. You need to know the broker's address. Now, as you can see in the configuration files of Ruijie, we have this address right here, which is their global broker. This means that all Ruijie devices all around the world connect to this broker and send messages over it. Next, we need the CA certificate of this broker. Now, you can think of it a bit like certificate pinning, if you're aware of this term. Basically, they need to make sure that their devices only connect to the real CA, and no kind of attacks can be, for example, a man-in-the-middle attack could actually expose their devices to different risks. Now, when we implement our client, we don't need to have the CA certificate because we can simply say, yeah, I trust it, I know the risks, and I can simply use the certificate that I get from the TLS endpoint. And lastly, I need to do some sort of authentication. Now, MQTT offers a wide range of authentication schemes. The two most common ones are either MTLS, meaning mutual TLS, where both client and server authenticate using a private key and a certificate, or, of course, username password credentials pair. Now, in the case of Ruijie, no MTLS was configured, meaning it's quite easy. All we need to do is to generate a valid MQTT credentials, and then we are able to authenticate to the Ruijie cloud. Cool, so let's see how we generate them. So we started reverse engineering the cloud binary mqlink.elf. And the first thing we noticed is that whenever the device tries to connect to the MQTT broker, it uses its serial number as the username for the MQTT credentials. Now, you see the serial number is a hardware identifier that is actually imprinted on the chip of the device during the manufacturing. And to read that, they simply read a different one specific proc mapping in order to get access to the serial number of the device and use it as is as the username. Next, we wanted to understand how the actual password generation was performed. And once again, the device relies on its hardware identifier, the serial number, and this is the simplified procedure. You see, they take the serial number, do string reverse functionality on it, meaning flip it up to the other way around, and then perform SHA-256 and use it as is as the MQTT password. Now we know how the actual client credentials are generated, and all we need is a serial number. Now, this is usually a question I ask myself: how do I get the serial number of a real device? Well, luckily for me, I have YouTube. You see, one thing people love do is show up their cool new gadget that they just bought, and they love doing an unboxing or a setup and tutorial. And usually what people would do is showcase the device from all different angles, and like Tomer told you, on the back of the device there is its hardware identifiers, including the serial number and MAC. So what I did, I searched on YouTube Ruijie unboxing and Ruijie setup, and people showcased to me their device's serial number. Now, because Ruijie uses the serial number, which is, according to people that simply showcase it on the internet, not a secure identifier, by leaking their device's serial number, people actually leak to me and anyone with YouTube access to their device's credentials. So this means that by knowing a device's serial number, I can simply log in on its behalf. So that's exactly what I did. I implemented a very simple Python script that connects to Ruijie's MQTT broker, And wabam, I got connection back 0, meaning my connection was accepted. I'm in. I am now a device. Perfect. So what's next? Next, we wanted to understand and reverse engineer and know what kind of communication is done on top of Ruijie's cloud. Now you see, like I told before, MQTT is a publish-subscribe protocol. So first, we look at all the topics that device publish data to. Now, we discovered 4 different topics. However, the gist of it is that by publishing data on these topics, devices actually alert the cloud of different events that occur to them. For example, if I have a status notification or a keep alive, I want to make sure the cloud knows I'm good. Or if I have a topology in a change, for example, a new client authenticated to me, my configuration was changed, anything like that. And by publishing messages over these topics, devices are able to alert the cloud of everything that happens to them. Next, we have the topics that devices actually subscribe to. You see, every device has a unique topic, which is device/serial number, which is, once again, unique to its serial number, that this device actually subscribes to. And then whenever the cloud wants to send commands to this device, for example, do this configuration change or do a firmware upgrade, a command is sent over this topic, and the device simply does what it's told. Cool, so now that we have a basic understanding of Ruijie's MQTT architecture, we are now able to do some vulnerability research. And the first thing we did is ask ourselves the obvious question. Can we actually subscribe to topics that device publish data to? You see, if we would be able to subscribe to these topics, which are just 4 topics for all devices around the world, we would be able to get all status events, alerts from all devices all around the world. So we simply took our client, subscribe, and once again, wabam, it simply worked. Now we have access to every alert that every device sends to Ruijie's cloud platform all around the world. However, the keen eye in you probably noticed something very, very interesting. You see, in every message, there is this field right here, which is the actual device serial number. Because we are talking about centralized topics, meaning all devices send the data to one specific topic, the clouds need to be able to somehow know what device sent the alert. And in order to do that, Ruijie simply sent the serial number in each message. This means that we composed a very big list of all messages we received. We took the serial number from each message, and then one unique sort and sublime command after. We have all serial numbers of all devices all around the world, around 50,000 or so. Now, at this point, we understood that we have something big, because we have all serial numbers of all devices all around the world, and Ruijie relies on this serial number to authenticate and validate devices, we now are able to authenticate and impersonate every device all around the world, meaning we are able to connect on its behalf, send falsified data, for example, hey, I'm good or I'm bad, I'm crooked, I'm down, whatever, and we are able to basically DOS the entire system, both by sending falsified data and by disconnecting the real device. However, like Tomer told you before, we want more. We are not good with just DOSing this whole situation. So we asked ourselves, how can we achieve RCE? And to do that, we once again looked at the other kind of topics that device interact with, which is the device/serial number. Now, because we composed the list of all possible serial numbers, we now had the ability to subscribe to every device unique topic to see what kind of commands does the Ruijie cloud platform send it. However, that's quite a hassle. I don't like doing a lot of work, and it will take some time to actually do and keep alive 50,000 subscribes. So I asked ourselves, hey, can I maybe improve it? And to do that, I need to understand how MQTT topics are actually constructed. So by this point, I told you that a topic is simply a string, a name. However, it is actually composed of different levels, where each level is separated by the delimiter MQTT chose, which is a slash. However, luckily for us, MQTT actually offers wildcard. It offers two flavors of wildcards. either a single-level wildcard, which is the plus command, basically telling the broker, hey, I want to subscribe to anything that matches this specific level. Or we have a multi-level wildcard, which basically is, do give me anything. And this is exactly what we did. We used the wildcard, the plus wildcard, to subscribe to device/plus, meaning we subscribe to all topics of all devices, and we were able to get all commands sent by the Ruijie Cloud Platform to devices around the world. And once again, tons and tons of different messages, because whenever a user clicks on a device, whenever he does some kind of configuration changes, anything, we get the actual callback, and we get all of it identifiable information. When we parsed it, however, we found something even more interesting. You see, this is the actual structure of a command sent by Ruijie's Cloud Platform to devices. And as it turns out, it is simply an OS command, meaning Ruijie's Cloud simply tells devices, hey, please execute this OS command and send me the output. And this is how they handle everything, meaning we want to do a configuration change, do a device config set. You want to do a firmware upgrade, fetch it with wget and run it. And because of that, this means that behind the scenes, we have full RCE capabilities if we are able to send commands to devices. So we asked the obvious question, can we actually send commands to devices? So I span up my Python script, added one simple line of an example command, and of course it worked. We are now able to execute code on any device. However, like Tomer told you before, because we have the cloud and we have 50,000 serial numbers, we are able to not only execute code on one device, however, on all devices all around the world, which is pretty huge. Perfect. Now let's talk about another kind of attack scenario. You see, if you would give me the ability to execute code on 50,000 devices, I wouldn't know what to do with it. And frankly, sometimes that's not the best option. You see, if I want to do a more covert operation and attack and pinpoint attack one specific client that I have interest in, it would be way cooler. Think about it. So let's show this kind of attack. So let's say about this attack scenario. I'm at an airport, and I want to hack into the internal airport Wi-Fi. Now, once again, I'm out. I'm not inside that network, so I can't simply interact with this device. However, luckily for me, I am able to have this vulnerability that I showcased you before. So I could hack the device if I get its serial number. So here is the scenario. I am at the airport, and I am a hacker. So let's show how I can do it. So what we did is actually sniff raw Wi-Fi beacons. You see, whenever you open your phone and try and see what kind of Wi-Fi networks are near you, you will find a very big list of everything that's near you. And how it's done is that behind the scenes, every device that distributes Wi-Fi sends something called Wi-Fi beacon message, which is basically a broadcast message over the Wi-Fi wavelength that tells devices, hey, this is my name, this is my specification, feel free to connect to me. And when we looked at beacon message sent by Ruijie devices, we discovered this interesting thing in the vendor-specific data field of the Wi-Fi message. Now, this field basically allowed the vendors to put whatever they want in it. And luckily enough, and strangely enough, Ruijie chose to put the actual access point serial number in the vendor-specific data, meaning all I need to do is simply sniff Wi-Fi beacons, and I get the access to the device serial number, and I can hack it. So we built this interesting open Sesame attack, where by being physically close to a device, let's say I want to hack into an office, I simply go by the office. Then I sniff the raw Wi-Fi beacons, leak the serial numbers, invoke the cloud vulnerabilities I showcased you before on this pinpoint device, and voila, I'm in. I have access to the internal network of this device. Cool. So that's exactly what we did. And then we decided to do the good thing and do the responsible disclosure. So we took the entire thing that I showcased to you along with a few other vulnerabilities and reported it to Ruijie. Luckily for us, they took us very seriously and implemented a fix basically as soon as possible. So I can tell you that if you wanted to exploit it, sadly you can't. Too bad. Look for new vulnerabilities. There are always some. Cool. So before we finish, let's do some very, very short takeaways. Basically, I believe that the black box that is an IoT device that people always said, yeah, we don't know what's running there, we don't know what kind of vulnerabilities are in there, it's still there. However, because of the use of vendor-specific cloud platforms, sometimes attackers do not need to be actually accessible to devices, meaning they don't need to be internet exposed in order to attack the devices. By hacking into the vendor's cloud platform, they can reach back and get access to organization's internal network, which is basically a NAT bypass vulnerability, giving attackers a front door into your network. Once again, because one common vulnerability we find in IoT devices is that while user authentication is very good, we have all of these platforms, device authentication is actually quite hard because device doesn't have an email, doesn't have a phone, an OTP. So vendors should rely on better secrets than just a device's serial number, which is easily guessable. Perfect. So I hope you enjoyed our talk. If you have any questions, feel free to go into the center of the stage and ask away. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you for the great talk. What was the vendor's patch for the device provisioning problem that you guys discovered?
So some vulnerabilities are simple fixes, like, for example, the wildcard or the ability to send messages impersonating the cloud. This is an easy fix, which is simply doing ACL. Some vulnerabilities are a little bit harder because they are architectural designs. There were some fixes regarding the actual architecture. They're still relying on some hardware identifiers. However, they do it more securely. I cannot say exactly what was the change, because I'm not aware of their internal infrastructure. They still do rely on hardware identifiers at some point. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question. The other CVs that you guys found, were they also using the same MQTT channel to exploit other type of commands that you could send except the CMD?
So the other CVs, it's a wide range. Some vulnerabilities are on the device, for example, the local RCE that Tomer showed you. Some vulnerabilities are in the device cloud communication protocol, and some CVs are for the ability to wiretap the actually all cloud messages. So it's a wide range. Basically, the main command type is OS commands to devices. So we did not issue multiple CVs on that regard.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Another question, someone? Perfect. So I hope you enjoyed our talk, and thank you very much.